Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Hager. This is their part number BB1168 4.5 USP ETW 8 is what this is. This hinge is not unusual at all. It might be a little less, somewhat less common only because it's in a prime coat finish. But this is a full mortise hinge that is an 8-wire modified hinge. So what you will use this hinge for will be obviously to pass low voltage current from the frame, wall really, from the wall through the frame, through the hinge, into the door to whatever requires the ability to communicate back upstream. And what that would be countless things. Why would you have something on or in the door that requires wiring, either power or just the ability to communicate? That could be electric latch retraction in a variety of pieces of hardware. Most definitely it could be some sort of monitoring that's happening in a lock case where you are monitoring for the door position, or you are monitoring for the position of the latch bolt, or you're monitoring for the tampering of that latch bolt. You might have a micro switch, like a request to exit switch, so that an audit trail is written back to access control. So every time you hit the inside lever to leave, that will communicate to your access controller that says, okay, that lever's been rotated, assuming exit. You could have that on a panic device. You could have a panic device that's just a touch sense bar that when you touch it, it will open the circuit to the electromagnetic lock at the top of the door to allow egress. You could have exterior trim on a panic or a lock that is either rigid or it's functional. I'm no expert when it comes to electrified hardware, but those are just the first things that came off the top of my mind for this. You could have an electric strike in a pair of doors, and you've got to pass wires through it. You could have an electric strike, why 8 wires or 4 pair? Your electric strike will require power, most definitely. But what if you're doing other things with it? What if that electric strike has the ability to monitor the keeper position? You'll need another 3 wires for that. What if your electric strike has the ability to monitor the presence of the latch bolt? You'll need another 3 wires for that. So you'll need 8, right? You'll need 8 at a minimum for that functionality of just an electric strike. If you want to know where the keeper is in relationship to open or closed, and if you want to know if the latch bolt is present or not. And when you think about why you would do that, well, what if I got in there with a tool and I pushed the latch bolt back and I opened up the door? That's no good because I'm not changing the position of the keeper. And conversely, I might be able to get the door open without pushing the latch bolt in and just changing the position of the keeper. So you might want to monitor both of those. And an 8-wire hinge wouldn't be appropriate for that. You'd want at least a 10-wire hinge for that application. Why would you need 3 for those features? Well, you have common, and then you have normally open or normally closed for each. What is the circuit when it's in this position or this position? In this position or this position? Is the circuit open or closed? And that's what your normally open or normally closed legs of the circuit would be. Your single pole double throw is what it is. Anyway, I'm not sure what this client is doing. This is going to a extremely well-known branch of the military that's in Quantico, Virginia. And what they are monitoring over this door could be a lot of things. That they obviously require a minimum of 8 wires. And they probably require less than that because they likely have at least 1 pair as reserve. These are very thin wires. We'll go over that in a moment. Let's dissect the part number now that we've talked about where you use it. And obviously, any door that's prepped for a 4.5-inch heavyweight hinge, steel doors, steel frames, wood doors, steel frames, wood, stainless, fiberglass, whatever. Probably not fiberglass, but aluminum. Probably not aluminum either. So let's dissect the part number. So it's a BB, it's ball bearing. You can see that there are 4 bearing packets. It's an 1168, and in no particular order. That means this hinge is made of steel. That this hinge is a full mortise hinge. You can see from the swag on the hinge leaf here and here that when the leaves are brought parallel, they're meant to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame. It means it's a 5-knuckle hinge, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It also means that it is a heavyweight hinge, and on a 4.5-inch tall hinge, that means it would be 180 thousandths thick, and my caliper tells me 0.187, 0.185. So yeah, you know, heavyweight hinge. As you change the height of the hinge, you'll change the thickness most likely. If you went to a 5-inch, that's going to be 190 thousandths. So that's all buried in that part number, BB1168. I don't think I've forgotten anything. Now, also, we have ETW, electric through wire, is what that's going to be understood, and that's quite clear. You've got wires that are literally, they've taken a hinge, they've heavily modified it, they've drilled holes, they've run these hyper small wires through the leaf, into the barrel, in a preparation likely in the pin, certainly in the pin, back out the other side, to where they've drilled that hole and they've brought it back out this hole in the backside. Okay. 8, ETW-8, that means that there are 4 pair of wires. So on each, there are 8 wires that go through this hinge continuously. Call it 4 pair if you want. You don't have to, but 8 wires. And then you have to think about how you're using all of those wires. Standard practice or best practice is going to conclude that you would always have a spare pair of wires in case these really thin wires, 28 gauge in fact, something's nicked. You don't have any ability to run a new wire through there. These hinges are thoroughly non-serviceable. The pin can't be removed. The pin has been roll pinned in place. It can't be driven out. There's no changes or modifications that can be made to this once it's done. The 4.5, 4.5, that's easy. That's obviously the size, but maybe a little deeper dive. The height is the first dimension on this hinge. It's 4.5 inch tall, and then it's 4.5 inch wide. Why is it important to know that? Well, it's not important to know that, I suppose, if you're forever dealing with square-shaped hinges. They're the same height as they are the width, or the width as they are the height. If you're dealing with a 4.5 by 4, a 5 by 4.5, a 4.5 by 6, a 4 by 3.5, you know, you're going to appreciate knowing that the height is that first value. Doors are different. Doors are opposite. In fact, the width is the first dimension. Louvers are, the width is the first dimension. Kick plates are, the height is the first dimension. Access panels are, the hinge is on the second dimension, as are roof hatches. So understanding how they're sized is important. If you, you know, if you have 4.5 by 4.5 prepped steel doors and frames, and you send, you know, your client says, I need 5 by 4.5, you better know that the doors have been sent out wrong. They're only prepped for 4.5, and that the height is the first dimension. So that's that part breakdown, with the exception of the last part, USP for prime coat. This is just a prime coat hinge. This will be available in all of the finishes that Hager can do on a steel-based material, and in no particular order. Your brasses, your bronze, your chromes, your nickels, satin polished, oil rubbed, lacquered, antique bronze, black. They might be able to powder coat something. Obviously, prime coat. Okay, this will include screws. This is a point that requires clarification. In this package, there are 4 wood screws and 8 metal screws. That's definitely a really good guess. I don't know what this client is using. They didn't qualify at the time of order. This is clearly the standard packaging from the factory, because that's what this came with. In all instances, it would be considered, again, best practice to indicate what screws you need. This client might have a wood door and a wood frame. It's very possible. And in that case, he's got half of the screws that he needs. This is a 12 by 1.25 inch threaded to the head, flat Phillips drive wood screw is what it is. Well, a sheet metal screw, I suppose. And then your 1224 flat undercut head machine screws. So indicate in the comment field what you would like to have. It's unusual. It's wood by wood. I've seen it all, so it could be wood by wood. Let's switch to the screen view now, and let's take a closer look at the supporting documentation. If you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Here is the hinge that we're working on, and I do have an image down below, some images down below showing us our hinge. I would ask Hager, send that out a little bit cleaner. Some of this wiped right off, but nonetheless, I would like it to be a cleaner hinge. That's the back side. Showing that epoxy that's been applied there, sealing that breach of the hinge wires coming out of the leaf. There are your leads all tied together, okay? One side, then the other side. We'll talk about the colors in a moment. That's what the hinge looks like in a cross section. This is the swag on the hinge leaf. This is what makes the hinge full mortise, that bend. If you change that bend, that relationship of the vertical axis of pivoting to that bend, you change the type of hinge it is. Here's a picture of our fasteners. Okay. Now, let's look at the extended description information down below. 8-wire, 28 gauge is what those are. Now it starts to become important to understand what the electrical characteristics this hinge is capable of. Maximum 48 volts. I think that's the cutoff before it becomes line voltage and no longer low voltage. You can power 3.5 amps continuously through this hinge, and 16 amps in a pulse that would be for, don't quote me, but a third of a second at the most, something like that. I know a trick is to simply, if you were running a higher amperage, that people will simply combine wires together. Order more wires in your hinge, but then combine those together to handle the current going through it. Basic hinge information. It is a full mortise, steel hinge and a steel pin, 180 thousandths, heavyweight, ball bearing, 5-knuckle. 4 ball bearings go along with heavyweight. If you change that to standard weight, you'll get 2 ball bearings. Button, tip, and plug. What that means is if you look at the tip of the hinge right here, that's called a button tip. If you use your imagination, it looks like the button on your coat. Button tip is what that's called. 8 holes are in the hinge. That's because it's a template hinge. Hinges are cross-pinned and are not field removable for use on heavyweight doors or doors requiring high-frequency service. Let's go over some information here. First, the template. This looks like an awful drawing. It's not. This is what's called the template. The location of these holes are called the template pattern. So that term is used differently depending on how it's applied. So if you have any door and frame that are made to a template location for the screw holes for a 4.5-inch hinge, rest assured this will fit. All of these dimensions are here to give you the location of those screw holes, along with where you need to prep the door and the frame to pass your wires through. So let's leave for our mind the moment of all these dimensions. If we strip those away, let's just look at these holes here, 13/16, and then C note A. Let's C note A. Where is note A? Note A, right here. Drill and deburr a 1-inch diameter hole in frame reinforcement for through wires. Note B. Where's B? Note B. Drill and deburr a 3/4-inch diameter hole for 4 through 8 through wires, or 13/16 diameter hole for 10 to 12 wires in door reinforcement. Okay, so what they're telling you here now, though, is if you're doing 4 to 8 wires, you're going to locate that hole in your door 3/8 from the edge of the leaf, and then what's likely to be in the exact center, and it is 2 1/4 inch shown here. If you're going to do 10 to 12 wires, you're going to go with this. You're going to go with a slightly larger hole, positioned a bit further over, 11/16 from the edge here. Okay, and that is in the reinforcements of the door and frame. This is the door leaf. This is the frame leaf. Now this hinge isn't handed, but they have to manufacture the hinge with some type of handing. And this is an 8-wire hinge, so it's not evident here that it's handed. But if you get into that 10 to 12 wire, you might say, why do I need to know the handing? Well, you know, I would want the proper side of the hinge pointed up, which, you know, isn't, I believe, going to matter at all in this hinge, but, you know, maybe you want your logo facing the right way up. I've had people call me and say, why is my logo facing down? And my response is, because you installed the hinge upside down. But that's not the case here. You know, you've got it. You potentially have a handed hinge. Well, you absolutely have a piece of hardware that handing should be called out. Whether or not, you know, you are concerned about where the logo is stamped is your concern. Now, so we've covered all of this. We've covered our notes. You have your BB1168 ETW, shows you the F dimension, which is the swag line to the edge of the leaf, gives you that dimension. Some people want to know that. For a 4.5 by 4, and then a 4.5, 4.5 naturally. So we're going to be down in this field here. Tells you what screws are included. The hinge is the hinge is intended to be used in the center position. You want the wires as close as possible to the hardware. Hospital type and round corner template hinges conform to the above screw size and location. They would be designated HT or RC. Hager template hinges are made in size gauge and with screw holes located to conform to the ANSI A156.7 standard, making it a template hinge. Now, the electrical characteristics, ETW, again, 48 volt DC max. And I think I said 1/3 of a second. Well, I was pretty close. 300 milliseconds. 3.5 amps continuous, 16 amps in rush for 300 milliseconds. And that would be for a piece of hardware, namely a competitor's exit device who requires a 16 amp in rush. These are 28 gauge wires. Let's move on to the next document here that we have here, and that would be the electric hinge installation instruction. Click on that and it will pull this document up. And the template really handles all of the requirements of the installation instructions. What they do show us here, though, is what the wire colors are going to be on your hinge. So we're going to have red and all the way down through white with yellow stripes on our 8-wire hinge. Okay. The instructions basically tell you, make sure that the hinge fits. Make sure there's no binding, that the holes that you're passing the wires into and through are clean, not going to cause a problem. There's documentation here about the EMN and ETM options where you have monitoring. You literally have a Form C switch capability in the hinge to be able to report back to access control what's happening when the door is opened versus closed or closed versus opened. You can conduct current through there in either instance, depending on how you configure it. Okay, so that's a handy document. Then let's take a look at the product catalog. This is right out of the manufacturer's catalog. BB1168, here it is. Okay, just talks about this hinge, BB1168. The table of what is available in BB1168s. I do not know off the top of my head the maximum size that they can do width-wise for a through-wire hinge, but I'm quite sure, I know that it'll be 5-inch. Whether or not they can do a, so the height doesn't matter. in terms of the maximum width. I don't know how wide they can go in a wide throw hinge. And in fact, I do believe I ran across this question a couple of years ago, and it was determined that Hager could do a wide throw. I just don't recall the maximum width that they can do, because what they actually have to do is, it's not very obvious, but these two holes, these two black dots, there's two black dots here, they drill holes through this, so I don't know how deep they can drill, is the bottom line. Okay. There's also a link called ETW. Okay, this is just a cleaner version of all of this material. An important note here to install a mortar box on mortar-filled frames. You don't want the grout to fill up the area where you need to pass wires into and through. Electrical characteristics, they seem to vary a little bit. The wire legend is here. Wire gauge, 28 gauge, typical for all models shown. For current ratings larger than 1 amp, use 2 or more wires in parallel. Make sure same color wires are connected properly to both sides of the hinge. Maximum total current for a 4-wire hinge is 2 times the maximum current shown in the electrical ratings chart. Let's take a little longer stare at that. So, for current ratings larger than 1 amp, use 2 or more wires in parallel. What it says up here is each wire is rated at 3.5 amps. Each wire. Maximum total current for a 4-wire hinge is 2 times the maximum current shown, which is 3.5 amps. And likewise for an 8-wire hinge. Okay? So now you can calculate what sort of current you can pass through this based on, you know, what each wire is rated for. I can't think of anything that you'd have to power continuously that would be in that higher amperage range. Continuously. There's obviously hardware that requires it. There is, of course, currently a major shift from solenoids to motors in hardware, which substantially reduces the amount of amperage required. Common sense, do not hang hinges by wires during the installation. You're going to damage the hinge, etc. I'll leave the rest of the installation instructions on this document for you to review. And then we have already gone over the electrical, we've already gone over the electric hinge installation instruction. Okay, now there is a link below this video here to the manufacturer's page, and when we click on that, we'll be able to pull up not only all of the Hager products that we sell by means of this horizontal navigation, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. And that's pretty handy. Jump into that full product catalog, and we will do so because we'll want to just look at the other things that go along with an ETW hinge. So we'll do a find function on our keyboard for ETW, and here we go. So we get to a page here where they're going to show us ETW, an overview of what that is. I had said earlier about best practice with additional wires. If you've got a 10-wire requirement, order a 12-wire hinge. You want a pair of spare wires. Electric monitor, electric through-wire with monitor. Okay? Talking earlier about basically a door position switch and a Form C or single pole double throw switch. That's here. So that's why I wanted to fire up the catalog to show you that there was were additional resources available. Hager can also do, and there's that 430 mortar box, by the way, for this hinge. Hager can also do their Quick Connect QC available on all of these hinges, and it's basically I was hoping that there would be, it's a black connector that will allow you to quickly connect this to other hardware such as lock sets and exit devices. Also on this page is going to be the 2010 ADA standards for accessible design. Why would you need to know that? Well, Hager makes a lot of products that are subject to federal ADA law, like levers and thresholds. There's also a link to their keying service manual, cylinder cores and keying catalog, and then a video that I did about the Hager in-house keying system that's there. They have their own keyways and whatnot. Let's wrap up this video on camera. Okay, in conclusion, fairly common hinge. If you see electrified hardware and you don't see the wires, that could be because of the electric transfer hinge that is there. The only thing that limits the deployment of electrified hardware is the imagination. When you have power and relays, you can do anything that you really need to do over an opening and probably do it multiple ways. If you have any questions on the Hager BB1168 4.5 ETW8 or any other Hager product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up. Please subscribe and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.